Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great honor of interviewing Trey Gammage, who is an adult SEL consultant in Columbia, South Carolina. He supports educators build social emotional competence through in person, virtual, and self paced professional development. Trey Gammage, who
Yes,
are you?
man. I'm an educator, and we said something before. You talk about perspectives and wisdom. One of the things that I thrive on is really keen words and sayings. And so one of the things that motivates me through life is to have an impact on everybody I have a conversation with. And it's not about my name or my voice or a quote that we have, but I just want to show good spirit and show good wisdom to folks that I interact and engage with to make some kind of difference in their life.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So,
Thank you.
can you walk us through your professional history up to this point?
Sure thing, man. So I graduated college, and after studying abroad in Europe for a semester, I moved to South Carolina and was working as a residence life coordinator as a residential high school. I started a business, was consulting for 2 years while I was also a city council member in a small town called Hartsville, running for or competing in Toastmasters World Championship of Public Speaking was also going on. Started my podcast, and in the last 2.5 years, I was working as a dean of students at a K-12 charter school. We grew from K-7 to K-12 over 5 years. So I worked with them as a consultant and full time. And now I'm back in full time consulting. I'm working with different schools and districts across the country, and I'm excited to keep spreading the word of SEL and doing great work.
Beautiful. So, tell me about your podcast.
Yes, sir. So the Dash podcast actually, have you heard of the Dash? Are you familiar?
No, no. Can you walk me through it?
Sure thing. The dash is the dash of life. And so we all have these moments in life that we consider when you go to a grave site, the most wealthy place on the planet. There's the day you're born, there's the day you die, there's a dash in the middle. It's not the beginning or the end that really matters, it's what you do in between that does. And so the podcast goes with you on journey. They started off by understanding the passion and the purpose, the process of your life, what made you successful. And after about 72 episodes, we shifted to focus more on educators and what is your process? How are you being a successful school leader? How are you implementing SEL? How are you impacting our industry of education? And so I'm documenting those pieces of life for folks like yourself, for other school leaders, but also for me when my grandkids ask, hey, what was granddaddy like? What was he doing in 2022? You can pull up the Dash podcast and have 9 days of content that you can look and see that was part of our family history and legacy that can continue to be passed on. So it's for other people, it's to add value consistently for free. But for me and my family, it's an opportunity to keep our legacy going and growing.
Beautiful. And why the field of SEL? How did you end up there?
Good question. So I studied psychology in college, and I've always had a gift to speak. I studied psychology, and I had a communication background. I quickly started to realize like emotional intelligence is something that's important that I think we call soft skills or communication skills. We don't give them the real gusto that they deserve. But the more research I did, the more studies I did in college, we did one on performance pressure. And we looked at how willing people were to take risks depending on who is watching them perform. And when people are watching you perform, you're willing to take more risks. And so having an intelligence that helps you understand how you respond, how you think, how you react, how you feel makes a difference. I spent a lot of time trying to work with students initially, and I realized to really impact the students, I've got to work with teachers. And so it's not just SEL, it's adult SEL specifically. Because I think SEL is great, but it makes zero sense to me how we are asking schools to implement a curriculum without giving the teachers the skills they need to deliver the curriculum.
Yeah, and that seems to be a need all over,
Hmm.
right? There was a shift with the pandemic, but the
Hmm.
professional learning has not come along. Do you have any stories of success of a district or a school implementing some of these programs?
For sure. So I know there's plenty. I've worked with 18 schools over 5 years, and so there's two schools I'm looking at particularly right now that we work with over multiple years. One school we worked with over a 5 year period, and one school over a couple year period. to see how practicing SEL, practicing adult SEL impacts student grades, impacts behavior. And so at one school, we see a decrease in 52% of incidence rates. We see 100% of people that participate in our program are able to recognize their strengths as well as their weaknesses. 89 or 93%, I believe, are able to apply the information that they learn from a session that we have immediately. So you're getting those results. And as far as like scientific data, I'm partnering with Miami University to figure out how we can synthesize some of this data and see what the true impacts are. But in terms of case study, I just did a session this summer with a woman who completed a training in emotional intelligence training a couple years prior, and she noticed a gap in one of the assessments that she received. And in that gap, she recognized that it was going to lead to tension, because that's what we talked about. Because who she was as a school leader was not matching up with who she was as a parent. And so once she found that out, she began to do the work on herself. And when we retook that assessment this year, that gap had been closed, and she no longer felt that tension that she felt before. And so that's a individualized example that speaks to the power of SEL for adults. And I'm working on getting some more formal data that will, be able to tell that story on a larger scale with more schools and more people as well.
Awesome. Let's praise the Teach Better community for allowing this opportunity to happen.
Absolutely.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Thank you. So, reading books is such an important thing. What is one book you would give someone that you love?
Man, other than my own book, I'll plug that later. One book I would give to somebody I love, and it may be a classic cliche, but Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon.
Napoleon Hill.
Yes.
Think and Grow Rich is a book, and there's so many books like that. But that was one that started to get me to thinking about autosuggestion and the power of the mind, the power of positive psychology. But there's, Think and Grow Rich. There's The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. Any book by Og Mandino. He has Christian fiction books that really train you. Like there's a book by him that takes you 9 months to read. I read that book for 3 years in a row, and it helped me improve who I am as a person. And so those self-help, self-development books, Tony Robbins.
Tell me more about that book.
It's called The Greatest. There's 3 versions of it. There's The Greatest Secret in the World, The Greatest Salesman in the World, and The Greatest Success in the World. So the idea is actually that you just keep reading them and keep reading them, and you continue to develop a new sense of yourself. There's a saying that says you should try to grow 1% each day. And if you do that, you'll grow to 37 and a half times the person you were the year prior. And that may be a principle that is in these books as well, but essentially how it goes, you read a story, and there's a story. One of the books has a story about a man who was successful and well doing, and then he comes upon hard times. He's drunk, he's homeless, and somebody splashes a puddle in his face, and he starts to see himself for who he is. The book shifts and goes back to some ancient times where this man meets somebody with scrolls, and these scrolls are in this big old warehouse, and they hold the secret to all his riches. And what the world thinks is that these riches are gold, these riches are secrets, that it's alchemy. But what it is actually these 10 scrolls. And these 10 scrolls deliver principles of life, like I will live each day with love in my heart. I will treat this day as if it is my last. I will give more value and service than I receive in return in the form of payment. And so you read these scrolls that are 2 to 3 pages long that breaks down, I will live this day with love in my heart, and it breaks down why, and it gives you a reason, and it gives you a rationale, and it really touches your heart. You read that 3 times a day for 30 days, then you move on to the next scroll. 3 times a day for 30 days, next scroll. And so you read each scroll for 30 days, and so it takes you 9 or 10 months to read that book. And then once you finish, it says if you enjoyed that, start over and do it again. And then you do it again, and then I move on to the greatest success in the world and the greatest secret in the world. But I did that for a 2 or 3 year span. That changed my life for sure.
And tell us about your book.
Yes, sir. So the book is Every Decision Counts, 8 Lessons I Wish They Taught Me in School. And a lot of what I found, I probably read 50 to 60 self-help type of books through a 5 or 6 year period. And what I found is that there's principles. There's about 15 principles. If you choose 3 of them, if you choose 5 of them, you're going to be successful at whatever you choose. And through life, through my dash, there's been people that have taught me lessons about life, about taxes, about money, about investing, about compounding, about perspective, about culture, about global citizenship, about service, about things that I never heard about in school. But fortunately, I went to 8 schools in 11 years. Fortunately, I had teachers inside of school and outside of school that poured into me and taught me things that I wish I would have learned in school, just frankly. And so I took some of those lessons from podcast interviews, from lessons that I learned from family members, from lessons that I learned from teachers, and I wrote letters to kids that I work with. I wrote 3 to 5 page letters to my little brothers. I wrote letters to the kids that I knew that were struggling in my classroom, and I made it into a workbook where you're reading a letter. Dear Dr. Martinez, did you know that every decision counts? And that if you work to get 1% better each day, here's what happens. Here's an example from Michael Jordan. Here's an example from my life. Now I want you to write an example from your life. And so each chapter has an opportunity for the kid to write something in, to ask an adult a question, or to reflect with their peers. So it's challenging you in different ways to get outside of your box and find the answers to some challenging questions that you need to know about life that nobody's going to teach you unless you ask the right question.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, sir.
And this show is called Wisdom and Productivity. Let's talk a little bit about productivity.
For sure.
This is so important for the success of anyone in
Absolutely.
any sector. How do you get things done and still live the life you want to live?
Faith and focus. Again, thinking about the people in my life. My second podcast episode, I had a mentor named Terrence Moore. And Terrence carries these cards in his pocket that say faith and focus, and it has Bible verses on it. But those two things simply give you what you need to move forward. And so I'm a person that I would say is a ready, aim, shoot. Or is that right? Ready, shoot, aim, rather. I shoot before I aim, then figure out what I'm doing. I make decisions quickly and not always rationally. So over time, I've realized that I have to put structures in place. I just did a formula recently, now that I've gone back to full-time consulting, and everything is going very smooth right now. I'm not the kind of person that operates well in routine or in monotony, and clocking in and clocking out and doing the same things daily does not work for me. But when I have structure from the other contracts that I'm working with, when I plan on a weekly, quarterly, daily, monthly, and annual basis is what I do. I multiply that by pressure, the pressure of execution. I got to feed my family. I got to deliver this to clients. I have to add value in my service. That's what equals execution for me. So structure, planning, pressure equals execution. And that's my formula for productivity, if you will. And so there's a lot of routines that I put in place. I have a morning routine. I like to wake up around by 5 o'clock. I like to wake up, and the first hour of my day is for me. I sit in my massage chair. I read my Bible. I write in my journal. I look at what I need to do for the day. If there's a task that I want to get done, I do that task. If I want to make breakfast, I make breakfast. If I want to work out, I work out. Some days are more structured than others, but I have a block of time that's set off for me. I schedule my time for my family. My son gets at least an hour to get him ready and take him to school. When he gets home, he gets 3 hours. My days are very structured. If I have things to do for businesses, they're in my calendar as far as when I need to execute, and then I plan my time around that. So success leaves clues, and it's not an accident. When I'm tracking, when I'm tracking, I'll give you a wonderful example. I have a 6-month journal that I use, and every Sunday I plan my week. Every day I check if I completed my task or my habits. Last week I stopped doing that on Thursday. That was the last time I checked my journal because I was going to Indiana. I was visiting my dad for his birthday. Sunday, I had to catch a flight to San Antonio. I made it, but when I got to San Antonio, I lost my wallet. I left it at the airport, and it was a not good experience. But I used this as a teaching moment for the training session that I had the next day. I was able to go back to my journal and recognize that I was not doing my routines. Because I was not doing my routines, I was not operating for the most productivity, and I forgot to put every time I travel, I put my wallet in a zipper so it doesn't fall out. I wasn't following my routines. I didn't do one of those things, and it cost me a lot of money to fix. Yeah, it cost me a lot to fix. So it leaves clues, and you got to be intentional. If I don't have a structure or a schedule, I'm not going to get things done. So I don't give myself an excuse to be lazy or to procrastinate, because I'm always pushing forward to find something else to be productive.
Awesome. Trey, this has been such a great conversation. Any last thoughts for the audience of the show?
Thank you for this, and looking to highlight the wisdom and perspective that folks have. There's the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions, and I think you're asking great questions that are not only helpful for the people that are listening, but they're also helpful for the people that you're speaking with, and making me think about things in a different way. Definitely want folks to check me out at Trey Gammage on social media and SELeducators.com.
Awesome. Pleasure to have you here, man.
Yes, sir.
Now we
Appreciate
are
it.
friends.
Always.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
indeed.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraim Martinez.
Chulo.
And LS Production. Chill out.